season. This guy, Rodgers, has developed the confidence of the organization's leadership, and they don't have the guts to back off and say, we can go for at least one more season, make a decent transition by having Favre come back in as either the starting quarterback or backup quarterback, which makes to me more sense than watching him get traded someplace else, being further humiliated by having Favre go out and prove that he's still got the moves and can take another team, first off, not just into the playoffs, but a couple games beyond. And shame on us for allowing the Packers organization to make that kind of move and allow him to be traded someplace else. I don't think it's about the money at this point. You've got the season that's about to begin. We're only 3 weeks away. And some hard and fast decisions have to be made. They don't need the uncertainty. I think Favre realizes that, and if he really loves the Packers, God bless him for taking the $20 million and saying, you know, I'll just let them go ahead and get along with their year, but I'll be proven right in the end. The guy that they are stuck with as quarterback is not the guy that will lead this team anywhere close to where they got last year.
In fact, if Favre isn't the answer, and that apparently is what the Packer organization believes, that Aaron Rodgers is their guy. Well, if you don't think Brett Favre is good enough anymore or can cut it anymore, well, then just release him.
Right.
Let him go.
Release him outright.
Let him try to work out a deal with somebody else or trade him to somebody else. I'm sure there are teams that are interested in the services of Brett Favre.
Right.
How do you explain the hiring, then, of Ted Thompson? They must thought he had a brilliant football mind to bring him into the most storied franchise in the history of professional football.
I don't know that they believed that he was going to be this much of a PR nightmare for them. No one ever thought, first off, that the organization would be in this position. But certainly, Ted Thompson has never been the person, even when he was with Seattle, that rubbed people the right way. He was always abrasive. This is the wrong kind of situation for someone of his demeanor to be in. And I think this is, you know, his ego versus Brett Favre's ego has just led this thing down pathways unknown, and frankly, down pathways that people never wanted to travel. They had the stockholders meeting. Very few challenged the Packer organization decision when they had a chance to do so. That might not have been wise because you are stuck now with a guy at the helm. For the first time, the organization's president, and I'm drawing a blank on his Murphy, has shown some stones and decided that he's going to go down and talk with Brett one-on-one.
But how embarrassing is that to get on a plane to Mississippi and beg Brett Favre to just stay on your tractor and stay home? That's embarrassing.
You got to stop your bleeding.
Would Packer fans love it if tomorrow they announced that Ted Thompson had been released and Brett Favre
would be ticker tape parades downtown Green Bay. Absolutely.
All right.
I'd be leading it.
Next topic. Now let's talk about the Milwaukee aldermen this week, voting to go ahead with a $20 per car wheel tax for every car and truck kept in the city of Milwaukee, and to proceed with the binding referendum question for voters this fall, which would require all private employers to offer sick leave for their workers. I'm still amazed, first of all, that aldermen would do this, and secondly, that it's legal, that they could legally require private employers to do almost anything.
I don't know that that is legal. Now it's deceiving because the referendum, it's misleading because you're putting false hopes before the voters. It's just an advisory referendum. I don't think that government can dictate these kinds of benefits in the private sector. I don't believe that that is the case.
I believe it's a binding referendum. I mean, they
is it binding? I thought it's advisory
because they got 40,000 signatures, so they had to put it on.
That one's binding. The county sales tax is the advisory.
Right.
Correct.
All right. But I would say that's going to wind up in court. I would think that the business community, if they have any smarts, and they do, would take that to court immediately. The other part of the piece here is the other piece of the puzzle here is that wheel tax. Mayor Tom Barrett, who watches this show, good for you, Tom Barrett, by coming out with a strong statement that you're going to veto this tax. It's a 26% increase on just people in the city of Milwaukee who own cars. Suburbanites who use city streets are not going to be affected. Businesses will not be affected. Non-for-profits will not be affected. It's only going to hit people at a time when food prices are high, gas prices are through the ceiling. It's a tax. It's a tax in a tax hell. And good for Tom Barrett. I just hope that somehow his veto does not get overridden.
Does this show Barrett's lack of power over the Common Council? I mean, in years past, the mayor kind of called the shots very often, but that doesn't seem to be the case here at all.
No, our system was set up to be a strong council, weak mayor system to begin with. I got to admit, I feel like I'm going to break out in canker sores for saying that for one of the few times I've ever agreed with Tom Barrett, this is one of those times.
It is one of the very rare occasions.
I think this tax is regressive in that it is a tax on people, many of whom don't keep up their vehicle registrations because of the cost. What leads them, the aldermen, to believe that they're going to all of a sudden get the money out of folk who aren't keeping their registrations up, that they're going to pay this additional $20. There's some inequities in it. I think that's been pointed out by some of the other aldermen. We pointed it out on this show. The referendum on benefits is the piece that bothers me. I think that it was a ploy to take advantage of turnout in the presidential election. And this will help boost turnout in those communities, those neighborhoods that are more influenced by union turnout, by union lobbying. That's where you're going to see a lot of muscle. The business community would be smart to put a lot of money into an intelligent campaign to make folk aware of what the consequences are of having this type of benefit handled by popular vote. And I don't think they're going to do that. Sad to say, they're the ones who will be affected by it most, especially
it'll hurt business.
Ma and pa operations are going to be highly impacted by this, but they don't have the lobbying muscle that the unions will have, and the timing, I think, is all kind of premised on a huge turnout in the November election that will favor the Democrats, and that the referendum will pass if it's not facing some kind of heavy resource from the business community to educate voters otherwise.
Can I say this, too, about this wheel tax? I think it's very disingenuous on the part of its supporters to say that it's going to replace these reassessments that are being done. If you believe that, I mean, you know, I want to sell you a bridge.
Well, the worst part was when they said they were going to, for 4 years, that at least during this cycle, there would be no increase. They can do that by a simple majority vote for an increase anytime they run short of money, and obviously this won't be the only time that the city is going to run short of money and need to put money in place that will handle road repairs, the rising costs they're facing, just as any other American family is facing in terms of energy costs, all of those things. People understand that these are the same kinds of costs that government faces. They want folk to be up front with them, though. And I just don't think this was one of those issues or methods where our elected officials were fair in dealing with their constituents.
You have to be leery anytime there's a targeted fund. So oftentimes that pot is created and it's used for everything but what it's intended for. And to say that these reassessments are going to go away, one of the biggest rackets, one of the biggest tools that can be utilized by local units of government to raise funding, I think it's disingenuous to play that game, to tell people that that's what's going to happen, because it's not.
Well, state government has already shown that there's no integrity to dedicated funds or segregated.
Well, not state government, the man in charge, the governor, who raids transportation funds to serve all his special interests, and now we've got a problem with trying to fix our roads in this state.
All right, next topic. We've got to talk about the announcement this week that the Black Holocaust Museum doesn't have enough funds to stay open. This, coupled with the announcement recently that African World Festival wouldn't be held this year, makes you wonder why the black community in Milwaukee can't even operate or support their own institutions. How can they ask everybody else, support African World Festival, come down, enjoy yourself, when they can't even get their act together to stage it?
Well, African World Festival and the Black Holocaust Museum circumstances are two very different kinds of circumstances. First off, with African World Festival, what you had was an organization that 3 years ago had to work itself out of a lot of debt, had to convince the community that they could come down to the festival grounds, enjoy a great festival, that it would be safe, that it would be entertaining, and that it would be educational. And then to top all that off, you had to make sure that people were inspired to come back the following year because of the experience they enjoyed the year before. For 3 years, the festival was able to do that. They have two major creditors. One is a bank, and the other is Summerfest for the rental of the grounds. And Summerfest has been extraordinarily cooperative. In fact, I would think that any other entity would probably not have the forbearance that Summerfest had in working with African World Festival, but they did, and they pledged that they would continue to do so. In good conscience, they could not, and I'm talking of the African World Festival Board, they could not go forward, try to stage a festival this year with modest underwriting and hope that they would whittle away at the debt, not just pay for this year's festival. And I think they could have staged a festival. They had a scaled down version, 2 days versus 3 days. They could have put that festival on. It could have paid for this year. It would have done absolutely nothing to help them in terms of their financial position.
But it would have been, from a PR standpoint, to their advantage. It looks really bad, and it raises the question. It begs the question that you did here, Dan, of why, when all of the other ethnic festivals are able to put on a sustainable festival every year, why can't this group do so? I think it looks worse when you say, no, we're just not going to have a festival this year, because then trying to rebound next year or the year after makes it that much more difficult.
Well, the timing was bad.
Is a big part of the problem, like for African World Festival, maybe even for the museum, how can you depend on a community to support you when that community doesn't have the money to support you? If the black community in Milwaukee doesn't have the money to go down and enjoy African World Festival, can it ever survive?
Well, now, wait a minute. Now, hold on a second. I wouldn't underestimate the black community. They have tremendous spending power as a group. They attend State Fair, they attend Summerfest, they attend some of the other ethnic festivals, they attend sporting events. Why not an African World Festival? Maybe there weren't the contingent of volunteers needed to pull this off. Maybe there wasn't the corporate sponsorship. Maybe there's just, I know there's ethnic pride, but maybe not the right amount of ethnic pride. But I think they do have some economic power. I don't think it's that, and I don't think it's because they're unable or too cheap to go to an African World.
The museum will probably survive in some
the museum,
form. They'll combine with the Black
museum will survive. The museum, in terms of a very different circumstance, and let me back up just a little bit. Kevin, you were right. It's corporate sponsorships that tend to drive festivals, and the gate receipts are kind of guarantees that you can go forward. But if you already start in a position where you've got a lot of debt, corporations don't want to pay off debt. That's right. What they want to pay for are entertainment efforts going forward. Back to the museum, you have a window of opportunity of virtually 3 months when the museum gets a lot of its customers. The month of February, the month before, the month after. And unfortunately, it's in those 3 months, because of Black History Month, that you get the bulk of people who are interested in coming to the museum. It had in times some really good corporate sponsorship. It's had at times some strong leadership from both the board and
Don't you think
administratively.
James Cameron's death?
James
something to
Cameron's
do with
death,
this?
there were opportunities that could have been taken advantage of at the time in his last years of life. Remember, Congress passed a resolution apologizing for America's role in lynchings. And what better icon
Than James
of
Cameron.
that than having a survivor
Of a lynching. Yep.
And that's what that museum is dedicated to. To be perfectly honest, it's not a feel-good kind of experience.
No, it's not.
And corporations don't want to pay for something that doesn't remind you of a feel-good kind of experience. It's very, very difficult to get corporations to put marketing dollars or foundation dollars into something that people don't walk out feeling, I guess, happy about.
So it should be a part of something else.
Well, it wouldn't hurt if there were that collection and then other either rotating exhibits or collections that are part of that show how life has changed for the better here in the United States, how attitudes have changed. But when you don't have the money to bring those kinds of exhibits in, if you don't have the space to put some of the more major exhibits, if you don't have the capacity to bring large groups in because parking is not available, if you don't have a staff that can handle large groups coming in on a regular basis because you don't have the money for that type of administrative cost, all those things weigh in. It needs a new roof. There are salaries that haven't been paid. There are champions like Marty Stein that are no longer living.
Right.
And he was a huge champion of that museum. There are corporations in this community that have scaled back in terms of their giving to operations like the Holocaust Museum.
And where I work in the legislature, there has been some state funding, but it's very hard to push this, no matter how historical or educational it is. It's very hard to push for money at the state level, especially without state legislators. That's just the way it is.
All right, we got to talk for a few minutes about the Brewers dropping all 4 games to their arch rival Chicago Cubs at Miller Park. No big thing, or a strong indication that this team is not World Series ready?
Well, I think we showed that that the Cubs are a better team. They have better personnel. They have a better manager. The Thursday afternoon game, we didn't. Our players, 2 of our players, Gagne and Fielder, didn't act professionally or maturely. They have to be able to handle the pressure if they want to be there in September and October. What worries me now, the optimist says, well, there's still 2 months left. There's a lot of time. However, if you look at the schedule, the Cubs in August play about 2/3 of their games at home, where they're very, very, very good. In September, we play a lot of our games at home. But if the Cubs are able to build on the lead that they have now in August, we might be just playing for a wild card in September. It was very depressing to see, and I despise the Cubs and their obnoxious fans, to see them come up here and literally take over our own home ballpark for 4 days, and then for us in one of the biggest series of the year to just take a powder. We got outplayed and outmanaged in every single facet.
Just 1 minute. A week ago, we were saying this team, we're playoff bound. Are we still?
We're still playoff bound, but I've always believed that we were playing for the wild card spot. I'm not going to say that the Cubs are a team of destiny. I don't think that the Brewers are. That's right. They could still fall apart. Our real competition is St. Louis. We have to stay ahead of them. We have to maintain, and we play very well on the road. The Cubs do not play very well on the road, so there are still chances for us to stay within striking distance of them. But keep in mind that if this comes down to the wild card playing the number 1 seed, we go back to facing the Cubs again. And I am hopeful that by that time we will have gotten our act together. I think a lot of the guys on the Brewers team they just stand in awe of the Cubs, and they get a little afraid.
The pressure got to them.
That's right.
They were intimidated because they were in supposedly their home ballpark, and everybody was against them, and they got rattled, and the pressure got to them, especially Prince Fielder and Eric Gagne in that last game of the series.
All right, well, speaking of a bad week, a new Inspector General's report shed some light on illegal hiring practices at the Justice Department under former Attorney General Alberto Gonzalez. The report found that senior department officials systematically use job applicants' political or ideological affiliations to screen them for non-political positions. That was against Justice Department policy and federal law, and it must have been pretty awkward for the applicants. Here's Rick Horowitz.
What is it about George W. Bush that makes you want to serve him? He looks like he could use the help? That would have been the wrong answer. That certainly wouldn't have gotten you the job in George W. Bush's Justice Department, at least not while Monica Goodling was guarding the gates. Monica Goodling's job, it violated the law, but it's what she did, was to try to stock the Justice Department with loyal Republicans, bedrock conservative Republicans. Even non-political career employees had to pass the Goodling loyalty test. And to sniff out closet Democrats or even moderate Republicans, she'd ask them questions like, who is the Supreme Court justice you most admire? Or the question I already mentioned, my favorite, what is it about George W. Bush that makes you want to serve him? Did I mention that this violated the law? Anyway, here's my question. What would have been a good answer to her question? Now, really, what if you were a highly qualified attorney applying for one of those career positions at Justice, and you wanted the job and you knew you'd be perfect for it, but you hadn't necessarily turned part of your basement into a candlelit mini shrine to George W.? What could you have said that might have passed muster with Monica? Depends on how comfortable you are with, well, let's call it ambiguous phrasing. What is it about George W. Bush that makes me want to serve him? Let's see. He makes you proud to be an American. He has very strong principles. He has a very nice wife. He doesn't let poll numbers get him down. He and Cheney have a really strong relationship. That little snorty sound he does at press conferences, he never gets psyched out about global warming. He looks terrific in a flight suit. Most presidents would have had their hands full with just one war. I love the way he says nuclear. No, that's not it.
Well, thank you, Rick. That's all the time we have. Thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of this hot weekend.